My name is Lan Tran, and at 69 years old, I thought I had already survived the worst day of my life. I was wrong. The worst day came 3 days after my daughter's wedding. That morning my new son-in-law arrived at my house with 2 lawyers and a thick stack of legal papers. He sat in my living room, looked me straight in the eye and demanded $20 million. What he did not know was that the $68 million he wanted no longer belonged to me. And when he discovered the truth, everything he had spent the last year planning collapsed in a single afternoon. But before I tell you how a greedy man destroyed his own life, let me explain how it all began. My late husband Min Kang and I spent 43 years building a business from nothing. When we married, we had no savings, no family wealth, and no safety net. He drove delivery trucks during the day and worked warehouse shifts at night. I taught elementary school and spent every extra dollar helping him grow his small transportation company. Year after year we sacrificed. No luxury vacations. No expensive cars. No designer clothes. Every profit went back into the company. Eventually that small company became one of the largest logistics businesses in the region. 5 years before Kang passed away, we sold the company for more money than either of us had ever imagined. After taxes, investments, and property sales, our family fortune reached $68 million. Yet almost nobody knew. We continued living in the same house. I drove the same modest sedan. I bought groceries at the same local market. Kang always believed that money attracted attention and attention attracted problems. Looking back, I realize how right he was. When cancer took him from me 2 years ago, my world shattered. For months I barely functioned. The only reason I kept going was my daughter Min Chow. She was 34, intelligent, kind, and successful. She worked as an architect and had always made her own way through life. I was proud of her independence. 4 years she focused on her career. Then everything changed. One evening she called me sounding happier than I had heard in years. "Mom, I met someone. His name is Hwang Nam." The excitement in her voice made me smile. After losing Kang, all I wanted was to see my daughter happy. At first everything seemed normal. Nam was charming, confident, well-dressed, polite, the kind of man who always knew exactly what to say. But during our first dinner together something felt wrong. The feeling was small at first. Just a quiet warning in the back of my mind. While Chow talked about architecture projects, Nam kept steering the conversation toward money. Not his money. Mine. He asked about Kang's business. How large it had been. When it was sold. How much the sale was worth. At first I answered vaguely. But the questions continued. Most people would ask about the man who built the company. Nam only cared about the company itself. That night after they left, I stood in the kitchen remembering something Kang used to say. People reveal themselves when they think nobody is paying attention. Over the following months I started paying attention. And what I saw worried me. Nam constantly encouraged Chow to spend more. She traded her practical car for a luxury SUV. They started taking expensive trips. Designer clothing suddenly filled her closet. Weekend getaways became luxury vacations. The changes happened so quickly that it barely felt like my daughter anymore. Whenever I expressed concern, Chow laughed. "Mom, life is short. You worry too much." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was simply an overprotective widow struggling to let go. That is what I told myself. Until the afternoon everything changed. I had invited them for lunch. Halfway through the meal I excused myself to answer a phone call. When I returned I found Nam standing inside my late husband's office. The room was supposed to be private. The door had been closed. Yet there he was, opening drawers and examining old documents. The moment he saw me his smile vanished. Then it quickly returned. "I was just admiring your husband's achievements," he said. The explanation sounded rehearsed. I nodded but said nothing. Later, after they left, I checked the office. Several folders had clearly been moved. One drawer was slightly open. That night I could not sleep. For the first time I seriously considered the possibility that Nam was not interested in my daughter. He was interested in what he believed would eventually belong to her. The next morning I called my attorney. Then I called my financial advisor. Within 2 weeks I made a decision that would change everything. Without telling anyone. Not even Chow. I began transferring nearly all of my fortune into a charitable foundation dedicated to education, healthcare, and scholarships. The process took months. Every document was prepared carefully. Every legal requirement was completed. By the time the foundation became active, almost none of the money remained under my direct ownership. I felt guilty keeping such a massive secret from my daughter. But deep inside I knew I was doing the right thing. Because the more I observed Nam, the more convinced I became that something dangerous was hiding behind his perfect smile. And 6 months later, when he proposed to Chow after only 4 months of dating, my worst fears began to come true. The engagement happened so quickly that I barely had time to process it. One evening Chow called and announced that she and Nam were getting married in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. I nearly dropped my phone. My daughter had always been cautious. She researched everything before making decisions. She spent months choosing a university, months choosing her first apartment, months deciding whether to adopt a dog. Yet somehow she was ready to marry a man she had known for only a few months. When I asked why the rush, she laughed. When you know, Mom. The answer sounded less like Chow and more like something someone had taught her to say. As wedding planning began, I noticed something strange. Nam seemed far more interested in the financial side of marriage than the emotional side. Whenever wedding expenses came up, his eyes drifted toward me. The venue cost more than expected. The flowers were expensive. The honeymoon package was upgraded. Every conversation somehow ended with the same silent expectation that I would pay. One afternoon they arrived at my house carrying a binder full of wedding plans. Nam opened it proudly. Inside were photographs of luxury venues, imported flowers, designer decorations, and a beachfront honeymoon resort. The total estimated cost exceeded $100,000. I stared at the number. Neither of them earned enough to afford even half of it. That is quite a budget, I said carefully.
Nam smiled.
Well, family should help family. Right before I could answer, Chow quickly changed the subject. But the message had already been delivered. A few days later, Nam approached me alone. He acted casual, but I could see calculation behind his smile. You know, Chow deserves something special. After everything your husband built. I remained silent. He continued. I mean, money is meant to be enjoyed. No point letting it sit around forever. The words irritated me more than I expected. Kang had spent decades building our wealth through sacrifice, discipline, and hard work. To hear someone speak about it so casually felt insulting. I contributed $20,000 toward the wedding. It was generous but far less than what I could have afforded. More importantly, it was a test. I wanted to see their reaction. The result told me everything. Chow thanked me sincerely. Nam looked disappointed. For a split second I saw genuine frustration flash across his face before he forced another smile. That expression haunted me. As the wedding approached, things became even stranger. Chow called less often. Our weekly lunches stopped. Family traditions disappeared. Whenever I called, Nam usually answered first. It felt as if an invisible wall had formed between my daughter and me. Then came the moment that changed everything. 1 week before the wedding, I attended a venue walkthrough. I arrived earlier than expected. As I entered the garden area, I heard voices behind a hedge. Normally, I would have announced myself. Instead, I froze. Because one of those voices belonged to Nam. The wedding is only the beginning, he said. Once we are married, everything becomes easier. Another voice laughed. How much is the old woman worth anyway? Nobody knows exactly, he replied. But definitely tens of millions. Maybe more. I felt my stomach tighten. The voice continued. And your wife, does she know what you are doing? Nam laughed again. She does not need to know everything. Eventually she will benefit too. Just wait until I get access to the family assets. The words hit me like ice water. For several seconds I could not move. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood. I wanted to believe there was another explanation. But deep down I already knew the truth. Every warning sign suddenly made sense. Every question about money. Every invasive conversation. Every suspicious glance toward my husband's office. It was never about love. It was about access. I quietly left before they could see me. That evening I sat alone in Kang's old study staring at his photograph. For the first time since his death I wished desperately that he were beside me. He always knew how to read people. He would have recognized Nam immediately. Instead, the responsibility belonged to me. And I knew exactly what I needed to do. The following morning I met with my attorney. We reviewed every trust, every account, every legal document. I wanted absolute certainty. If someone attempted to challenge my estate, they would fail. If someone attempted to pressure me financially, they would fail. If someone attempted to manipulate my daughter for money, they would fail. When the meeting ended, my attorney looked at me seriously. You are protecting more than assets. You are protecting your family. I hope she was right. The wedding day arrived beneath clear blue skies. Everyone commented on how perfect everything looked. The expensive decorations. The luxury venue. The endless champagne. The live orchestra. The designer clothing. It looked like a fairy tale. But beneath the surface something felt wrong.
Nam smiled Constantine.
Yet his eyes never seemed happy. They seemed focused, calculating, waiting. Several times throughout the evening I caught him watching me. Not as family, not even as a person. He looked at me the way an investor looks at an opportunity. And during the reception I overheard something that confirmed my worst fears. Nam was speaking quietly with one of his friends near the bar. Just give it time, he said. People her age eventually start thinking about inheritance. Once that conversation begins, everything changes. My heart sank. He was already planning the next move. The wedding had not even ended. As I drove home that night, I realized something important. The real battle was not beginning months from now. It had already begun. And somewhere deep inside I had a terrible feeling that Nam was about to make his first move much sooner than anyone expected. 5 days later, a black luxury sedan pulled into my driveway. And everything exploded. 5 days later, a black luxury sedan pulled into my driveway. And everything exploded. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen when I saw the vehicle through the window. At first I assumed it was a delivery driver. Then 3 people stepped out.
Nam.
And 2 men in expensive suits carrying briefcases. Lawyers. My stomach immediately tightened. I opened the front door before they could knock. Nam wore the same confident smile he had displayed throughout the wedding. But this time there was something different in his eyes. Arrogance. The certainty of a man who believed he had already won. Good morning, Lon, he said. May we come in? I stepped aside without speaking. The lawyers entered and took seats at my dining table. One of them placed a thick folder in front of him. The other opened a laptop. Whatever this was, they had planned it carefully. Nam sat directly across from me. For several moments nobody spoke. Then the older lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Tran, we are here to discuss family financial matters. I folded my hands calmly. Go ahead. The lawyer opened the folder. As the husband of your daughter, Mr. Nam believes it would be beneficial to discuss future inheritance planning. Inheritance planning. I almost laughed. 5 days. The man had been married for 5 days. Not 5 years. Not even 5 months. 5 days. And already he was sitting in my house discussing my money. I remained silent. The lawyer continued. Mr. Nam is concerned that significant family assets may become vulnerable without proper legal structures. I looked directly at Nam. And what exactly are you proposing? His smile widened. A family trust. Shared oversight. Transparency. The words sounded professional. But their meaning was obvious. Control. He wanted control. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting. And why does this concern you? Nam answered immediately. Because I am family now. Family. The word felt almost offensive coming from him. I stared at him for several seconds. Then I asked a simple question. How much do you think I am worth? The room became quiet. One lawyer adjusted his glasses. The other looked uncomfortable.
Nam hesita.
Only briefly. Then he spoke. People talk. There are estimates. Business sales. Properties. Investments. I smiled. That is not a number. His confidence slipped slightly. Maybe 60 million. Maybe 70. Close enough. For the first time I saw genuine greed behind his carefully crafted mask. Not ambition. Not concern. Greed. Pure and simple. The meeting ended badly. I refused every proposal. The lawyers gathered their documents and left. Nam remained seated. When the front door finally closed, he looked at me differently. The charm disappeared. The politeness vanished. For the first time I saw the real man. You are making a mistake, he said quietly. Am I? Yes. You cannot hold on to everything forever. I smiled. Watch me. His jaw tightened. Then he stood and walked out without another word. The next few weeks became increasingly difficult. Chow called less often than ever. When we did speak, she sounded distant, defensive, almost rehearsed. Eventually I realized what was happening. Nam was poisoning her against me. Small comments, small suggestions, tiny seeds of doubt. Nothing dramatic, just enough to slowly change how she saw me. One evening Chow called unexpectedly. Her voice sounded nervous. "Mom, can we talk, of course?" There was a long silence. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. "Why do you not trust Nam?" I closed my eyes. "Because I believe he is using you." The silence that followed felt endless. Then she sighed. "He said you would say that." My heart sank. "He said you never accepted him. He said you think nobody is good enough for me." I realized then how carefully he had been preparing. Every concern I expressed had been turned into evidence against me. Every warning became proof of my supposed prejudice. I tried explaining, but Chow no longer listened. Not really. She heard my words, but she believed his version of them. Finally she said something that broke my heart. "Maybe you are just afraid of losing control." After the call ended, I sat alone in darkness for nearly an hour. Losing control, I would have given every dollar I owned to protect my daughter. But she could no longer see that. 2 months later the truth finally began to surface. And it happened completely by accident. One of my closest friends worked at a private investment firm. We had known each other for over 30 years. During lunch she mentioned something unusual. "Lon, I need to ask you something." "What is it? Does your son-in-law have financial problems?" My attention sharpened immediately. Why she hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Because his name appeared during a risk assessment review. Several large unpaid debts, business defaults, outstanding loans, legal disputes." The list went on. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. "How much debt?" I asked quietly. She looked uncomfortable. "Nearly $2 million. For several seconds I could not speak. 2 million. Now everything made sense. The pressure, the obsession with inheritance, the constant discussions about money, the rushed marriage. He was drowning, and he believed my fortune was the lifeboat. That night I hired a private investigator. It was not a decision I made lightly, but I needed facts, not suspicions. Facts. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. When the report finally arrived, I opened it with trembling hands. By the 2nd page my blood ran cold. By the 10th page I felt physically sick. And by the final page I realized the situation was far worse than I had ever imagined. Because debt was only the beginning. Nam had been hiding a secret so devastating that if Chow discovered it, her entire marriage would collapse overnight. And for the first time I understood that this was never simply a man chasing money. This was a carefully planned operation that had started long before he ever met my daughter. And the evidence proving it was now sitting on my desk. I spent nearly an hour staring at the investigation report before I found the courage to continue reading. Every page revealed another lie, another deception, another hidden piece of the man my daughter had married. The report showed that Nam had not simply accumulated debt through bad decisions. He had built an entire life on manipulation. Several years earlier he had entered relationships with women who came from wealthy families. Each relationship followed the same pattern: charm, trust, financial dependence, then sudden disappearance once the money stopped flowing. One woman had even filed a civil complaint against him. The case was eventually settled privately. Another woman reported that he had borrowed large amounts of money and never repaid it. But the most devastating discovery was waiting near the end of the report. Nam was involved with another woman. Not before the wedding. During the marriage. The investigator had photographs, messages, bank transfers, hotel records. There was no room for doubt. My daughter was being betrayed. The moment I finished reading, I wanted to call Chow. I wanted to tell her everything. But I knew she would never believe me without proof. And proof alone might not be enough. Nam had spent months controlling the narrative. Months convincing her that I was the enemy. So I waited. I continued collecting evidence. Then fate intervened. One rainy Thursday evening my phone rang. It was Chow. The moment I heard her voice I knew something was wrong. She was crying. "Mom, can I come over?" 20 minutes later she arrived at my house. Her eyes were swollen. Her hands were shaking. Without saying a word, she sat on the couch. Then she whispered something that broke my heart. "You were right." For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she handed me her phone. On the screen were messages. Hundreds of messages. Messages between Nam and another woman. Promises. Plans. Lies. And among those messages was one sentence neither of us would ever forget. "Once I secure access to the inheritance, we can finally start our real life together." The room felt silent. Chow stared at the floor. I wrapped my arms around her. For a long time she simply cried. Months of manipulation. Months of betrayal. Months of emotional abuse. Everything collapsed in a single evening. The divorce process began shortly afterward. When Nam realized Chow knew the truth, he panicked. His calls became desperate, then angry, then threatening. He accused her of betrayal. He accused me of destroying the marriage. He blamed everyone except himself. But the situation became even worse for him. Because while preparing the divorce case, Chow discovered additional financial records, hidden loans, forged documents, false statements. Some of them raised serious legal concerns. Soon investigators began asking questions. The man who once believed he was about to inherit a fortune suddenly found himself fighting for his own survival. Then came the final confrontation. Nearly 6 months after the wedding disaster, Nam appeared at my house one last time. This time there were no lawyers, no confidence, no expensive suit, just a frightened man whose carefully constructed future had collapsed. He stood on my porch looking exhausted. "Please," he said. "I just need help getting through this." I studied him quietly. The same man who once demanded access to my assets was now asking for mercy. "Do you know what the saddest part is?" I asked. He looked confused. "You could have had a wonderful life. You had a wife who loved you, a family willing to welcome you, opportunities most people only dream about. But none of it was enough. You wanted more." His eyes dropped toward the ground. "And in the end your greed cost you everything." For the first time he had no response. No clever explanation. No manipulation. Only silence. A few moments later he turned and walked away. That was the last time I ever saw him. Today Chow is rebuilding her life. The healing process has not been easy. Trust once broken takes time to repair. But she is stronger now. Wiser. More careful about who she allows into her heart. As for the fortune everyone fought over, the charitable foundation continues growing. Thousands of students have received scholarships. Hospitals have received support. Families have been helped during difficult times. The money ended up exactly where it belonged, helping people who genuinely needed it. Sometimes people ask whether I regret transferring the $68 million. My answer is always the same. Not for a single second. Because money can build houses. It can buy luxury cars. It can create comfort. But character cannot be purchased. Integrity cannot be inherited. And greed always reveals itself eventually. If there is one lesson I learned from this experience, it is that the most dangerous people are not the ones who openly ask for your money. They are the ones who pretend to love you while secretly calculating its value. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. And tell us in the comments what would you have done if you discovered someone married into your family only for money. Your thoughts may help someone avoid making the same painful mistake. See you in the next story.